Inspire with Nendrix, the foundation.
Hello and welcome back, Embracing Arms community. Thank you for joining us during the last few weeks as we spoke with amazing parents from all over the country about the topic of homeschooling. We talked a little bit about COVID also, some best practices as it relates to homeschooling, some challenges that some of our parents are facing, and how are they balancing it all. Homeschooling, as you know, is a form of education in which parents or others provide educational instruction for children at home rather than entering the children in a traditional public or private school setting. And it is a hotly debated issue. Some reports reveal that in the school year 2017-2018, there were about 1.1 to 1.7 million children receiving their education through homeschooling with either a parent, a guardian, or a tutor in the United States. And we predict that as of 2020, that number may have increased significantly, partly due to COVID-19. So today is part 4 of Homeschooling, the New Normal. And we have with us today Dr. Alonzo Fleming. Dr. Alonzo Fleming is an educator. He's also a consultant and an entrepreneur, and he's the father of 3 young men. He has been homeschooling them as a single father for nearly 10 years, and he is from the great state of Texas. So help me welcome Dr. Fleming today. How are you today?
I'm wonderful, Danielle, and thank you for inviting me on your program. I look forward to speaking with you about this very important issue.
No problem, no problem. It's my pleasure. You know me. I love connecting with people and bringing them onto this platform and just trying to learn a little bit more about what folks are doing on their side of the country, especially as it relates to this pandemic. So this is always exciting for me. I spent a few minutes talking to the Embracing Arms community about who you are, but would you like to share some things about you for the viewers, something special or unique that you would like to share?
Oh, well, I'm just enjoying myself as best can be during this time and just having a great time. And to be honest with you, just enjoying the fact of being home most of the time and being able to be in my children's lives even more since this pandemic. So
yeah,
as a father of 3. And a 15-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 21-year-old who he'll be 21 tomorrow. Yeah.
Yes, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. My daughter just turned 21, and it was hard because she's the youngest. So I'm like, oh man, she's turning 21, and she looks like she's 13. So, I think I get the best of both worlds. I get a kid that looks like she's 13, but she's actually old enough to, do her thing. So let's start talking a little bit about homeschooling, and maybe we can start off talking about what motivated you. Like, what was the motivating factor that led you to begin that homeschooling journey with your children?
Well, I would be remiss, Danielle, if I didn't give a lot of credit to my former wife, who we both started doing this together when the boys were, oh gosh, in 3rd grade. I would imagine my oldest boy was a 3rd grader at the time. We just felt that we could give them the cultural aspect as well as the intensity of mathematics and science, which we both are mathematicians. And so we felt that they needed that to get the edge in life. So that's mainly what motivated us. And then we hope to keep them from making some of the same mistakes career-wise that we made. Mm-hmm. So that was the main motivation, a series of things like that.
Well, that's interesting. That's what a gift for your kids that you guys were both mathematicians, because that seems to be the one skill that a lot of our homeschooling parents struggle with the most. So aside from everything else, teaching them the sciences and the social studies and the English, but the math, math seems to be the thing that they struggle with the most. When you went into this process with your children's mom, did you guys feel like you were best prepared for it? I mean, I know you have the background of the the degrees and the science and the math background, but did you feel like you was prepared to actually take on that journey?
No, we didn't feel prepared, especially me. I felt that I was not going to get wifey time. Uh, so it was, the self-serving aspect of it.
Right.
But no, we didn't feel like we knew what we were doing. We got our hands on a great program that kind of walked us through the process.
Mm-hmm.
And as we became more familiar with the process, we were able to catch on really quickly.
Okay. So during this time, and I know that you mentioned that they homeschool kind of off and on over the
Yes.
past 10 years. Did your sons ever question why they were being homeschooled, or ever wanted to kind of be in the mainstream and going to the public schools? And did they ever prefer that or ask about it?
Well, I have 3 Zoomers, Generation Zs, and Zoomers are they're more isolated. They're content with being by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that was never a big issue. Them being in the public school, they never really made any complaints about it. In fact, during the COVID thing, it's been just hunky dory for them because of this whole thing, But
Right.
no, it was never an issue at all with these
That's
guys.
great.
That may not be the case with everyone, but with my sons, it was not a problem.
That's great. That's great. When my daughter, way back, when my daughter was just a freshman in high school, she had asked about homeschooling because she was a young entrepreneur and she felt like going into the school building was interrupting her entrepreneurship. And we were like, well, how can we balance this? I want her to get her education, but she's hating being in that school and it's like a huge distraction. We tried it for a semester, and it was funny because the first day of homeschooling happened the day after our house caught on fire.
Wow.
So it was trauma from the beginning. Like nothing was working out right. So her experience, unfortunately, was not a good one. And so it only lasts one semester, and she was back on campus. So
now that you mention that, I have to admit that I do remember consulting before we started homeschooling. I was working with this school in California while we were in college called Futures in Education.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a high school for people who had other skill sets. For example, you might have a student that wants to be a rodeo cowboy.
Mm-hmm.
The traditional school setting doesn't work.
Right.
Or someone who wants to be a swimmer or go to the Olympics. So this school, Futures in Education, was a school for those type of students. And it was basically set up like a series of tutoring. They would go from one teacher to the next. So they'd go from a math teacher one-on-one to an English teacher one-on-one. So it was really a great eye-opener for me. So I think that's where we initially got the idea. You know what? We could pull this off at home. She was the great writer. I was the great physicist and scientist and all that. And so we split it up in those areas. She basically dealt with the English, the literature, and I dealt with the sciences.
Awesome. I had it all. You had the whole trifecta going on right there.
Yes.
That's awesome. Do you think that, now, I mean, if you look what's going on in our country all over, so much is going on, and so much is really making parents a little more anxious, filled with a little bit of anxiety, sending their kids off to school. I just recently read an article where a teacher from Asia, I think she lived in China, actually poisoned 25 of her kids in her classroom because she was angry at her peers that worked at the same school. One child ended up dying. The other one was really sick. And so that just made me think, oh my goodness, like we really rely on these school systems. Does it make you feel like homeschooling is a little safer?
Well, yeah, you know it's safer. You know where your children are. You know what they're doing at any given time. You know who they're with. And especially in times like these, I guess it really works because I know if I step out of the house, I'm not going to have to respond to a, what do they call it, active shooter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, you
Exactly.
know,
Because
those,
it's in your home, so you're controlling that.
right, you have a lot of control in that. The only deal is that as teenagers, they eat and they eat and they eat.
They eat when they're not even hungry. They just eat.
So you do kind of see the repercussions in your food budget.
Right. Exactly. I noticed that too. Yes, that does increase. And then and they're not hungry. It's just there. It's there. So homeschooling itself will almost certainly continue to grow. So that's not going to stop. And nations and communities will actually have to grapple with the question of how best to balance the interests of children and parents and society in the realms of education and schooling. In your view, were there any drawbacks to homeschooling or and if they were,
The curriculum is, especially being an African-American man, and I can speak from this because this is exactly what has been the case. The curriculum, education is the transmission of civilization.
Mm-hmm.
So a school system's curriculum is designed for the people that it's going to serve. Mm-hmm. But if the people that it's going to serve have different histories, even though they're in the same country, there's a different perspective on history and they come from a different context, then the curriculum is not going to address one aspect of it unless that people is highly developed. But that's the biggest issue, the curriculum, because finding a curriculum that address let me just take my piece of it. My strong suit is the sciences. Mm-hmm. So the curriculum is difficult to find a curriculum that address the sciences from the way my boys learn. Mm-hmm. My boys learn, they want to see the whole house first, and then you give them the tools to build the house. Mm-hmm. But the math curriculum today, they give you a screwdriver, they give you a hammer, they give you a nail, and then they show you a picture of the house and tell you to use these tools. So they teach you how to use the tools, but they don't teach you how to use the tool as it applies to the home. I don't know if I'm making sense saying that.
Exactly.
But we learn holistically.
Right.
So we need the conceptual aspect of it first. And so just getting back to that whole point about curriculum, the concept, now they're starting to get to it, but people are belly aching about that. I like Common Core.
Yeah.
I like Common Core
because a lot of controversy with Common Core.
But if you notice, there's this video going around Facebook where this guy is doing on one side, he's doing all these little things, and this lady is figuring it out, and I just get so steamed at people they're not catching it.
Right.
You would not teach that way for the child to do the problem, just, because she was teaching the concept. Right. The concept that she's teaching, and the other guy is just simply applying the concept.
Right.
So, that's the issue.
Right. And I think that's, there is a lot of pushback on that used to be one of my biggest issues and concerns, especially because I'm not the mathematician. One of the struggles, that I had, as a parent was that the math kept changing. Every time my child would go into a different level in school, the way to solve the problem would change. Not the answer, of course, 1 + 1 is going to equals 2, but the way they were teaching them to solve the problem would drive me batty because I'm like, I was was never taught, this lattice process. I was never taught this thing here. And it made it difficult for me as a parent to support my child because I didn't understand it. And so if I didn't understand it, I'm like, well, how is she going to understand it? Or how is he going? So there's been a lot of frustration around that, with the curriculum or just the way our teachers are teaching, because we want to do it the way we learned how to do it. I know how to do long long multiplication.
The problem with that is that, see, the school systems, they're trying to find a way to allow the student to lead them. See, because the teacher has to conform to the student, not the other way around. Mm-hmm. But during the Industrial Revolution, it was a widget type society. So every man just had to learn how to do a widget. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So coming out of the Industrial Revolution, where assembly line style, the country is confused because where do we go? Mm-hmm. So they've been trying all this stuff to help us to come out of the Industrial Revolution thinking. Mm-hmm. But if we take the approach of a coach, then it'll be easier, because we then give the student the ability to lead, because each one has a learning style. Mm-hmm. And as teachers or the coach's job is to learn the learning style of the student and then conform his teaching style to the learning style of the student. Mm-hmm. And that's how Einsteins are made. That's how Edisons are made. That's how Garrett Morgans are made, because they're allowed to be free. Einstein came up with his theory of relativity by imagining what it would be like, what would time look like if he was riding on a light beam. Mm-hmm. You have to give the child an opportunity to use his imagination. Right. So I think the country is trying to find a way to that point. Okay. And so they're trying all this stuff instead of just letting the kids go.
Right. And that's the thing, I've always pushed the idea about the learning styles. I think that's one of the biggest struggles that's happening right now with the at-home learning, where all of these kids are now, forced to be at home, with the homeschooling now, and with parents who are now the partners, the educational partner right now, or the homeschooler. But the problem is that there is a lot of educators who don't quite know how to teach to multiple learning styles. And so they're so used to teaching in one way, where they're standing in front of the class and they're giving a lecture, they're giving an activity, and then they're moving on to the next group. And now you're talking about, you're in front of this computer, you're dealing with kids who may be more kinesthetic and can't really activate that.
Right.
You're in front of this computer. What do you say to those educators who are, forced to deal with this platform for teaching, but are struggling with the learning styles?
This is where the brilliance of the teacher comes in. Mm-hmm. See, the teacher has to be able to study the student. Mm-hmm. And take, for example, let's suppose that this interview, I felt more comfortable moving around in the interview. Mm-hmm. And you notice that I'm doing back and forth in my chair, and you would notice that I need to move or do something. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't take anything away from you teaching me by saying, hey, why don't you stand up? Mm-hmm. And let's talk while you're standing up. Right. Or hold your computer. I just happen to be on my laptop. Hold your computer. The idea being that you're opening my learning faculties up. Right. But the generation of teachers that they're still cranking out, much to our dismay, they just haven't come out of the Industrial Revolution style approach yet. Just haven't come out yet. I think that we're going to probably go to another 2 presidents before this country really catches on. Mm-hmm. Because China is going to force the issue, but that's another thing.
Right. Yeah, that's another segment.
You see how you can pull in all this data,
right?
Because it's just just being free to learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah, being free to learn. So my boys, like for example, I have books everywhere. I don't force them to read. Right. I have books everywhere, and I turn off the internet at a certain time of the day, and say, well, this is for you to do study or reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't make them do either one.
Right.
But the boredom itself does the job.
Exactly. I like that though. I like that concept. I actually love books too. I have books everywhere in my house, and just in the bathroom. I have books in the bathroom. You know, some of them are brand new,
Everywhere.
haven't been open yet, but they're there. So
They're there.
access, you know, to them. So yeah, I agree. I might have to
My
come
mother
to your
gave me
house
for my 30th birthday, my mother gave me this book called Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex but Was Afraid to Ask. She gave it to me at 30. And it was a joke that the reason she gave it to me, because she had that book in our bookcase and I was reading it, sneaking it. And she gave it. She never said anything about it.
Gave it to you.
But at 30 years old, she gave me that book. And I said, you knew I was reading that book all along.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. You know, but it makes sense. I mean, if you put those books out there and you take away the option or the possibility that they will be distracted with something else, they'll be out of sheer boredom, will resort to one or the other. And if you have access to the literature or something that will help stimulate their thinking, help strengthen their learning, that's going to, you know, that's kind of like a kind of like creating a new culture in your family. And like I said, I'm doing book reads with my grandkids. I do book reads with my organization that I'm with in Wisconsin. And every time I do a book read, I send the book, you know, pack the book up so I can send it out to my grandkids. And they think it's like so cool that their grandmom's on this computer doing this book read and they have the book, you know, in front of them. But just really exposing them to that and having it accessible to them goes a long way. I know they're doing a long way with my kids.
Same here. Yes. Just having it around.
We know also that, you know, homeschooling is going to remain a fertile ground for research. Because we're still trying to explore it. And it's just fascinating. It's fascinating to me. And just in and of itself, but it's also for what it pushes us to consider about the purposes of education more broadly. And with COVID-19, it has forced many of our parents to homeschool, of course, or provide some support for their children as required for to participate in distance learning. So they're partners now with their educators in a way that they had not been partners before.
Right.
Yeah, you know. Right. And because before we would just drop our kids off at school and be like, all right, good luck, teacher. And now, you know, you're IT specialist, you're the nurse, you're all those things, you know, and you're the educational support. So this has caused so much frustration for parents for many reasons. What are the biggest challenges do you see facing parents today as they're forced to be in this space, homeschooling or supporting the distance learning of their children?
I think just from my consulting with different districts and interacting with the children and the parents of those districts, that the parents have a sense of inadequacy. Let's suppose you don't have a parent that has a college degree or even a high school diploma and have not looked at math or whatever the case is, or even read a book in years, and their student is coming home or at home, they just have a sense of inadequacy. And so one of the challenges for the parents, you know, if we're talking to parents, is to dive in. They're just, I mean, you can literally get educated online nowadays. Coursera has so many classes that are free, taught by reputable university professors. You know, just dive in because that's where I see the thing is they just don't know. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know how to do it. I can't keep up with this stuff. These emails come at me every single day, all day, and I'm fussing in because he hasn't turned in a thing, and I got a 25 emails saying that he's failing, and he says he did it, you know, and that's frustrating. So the parent has to just dive in, shave off time for that, for example, if the parent is at, okay, now what's going on? Okay, we're building the technologies to help the schools communicate with the student. So the parent has to, whether you're working or not, just has to shave off some time every day to say, this is what I'm going to read. Only educational emails coming from teachers, and respond to those emails, or whatever the case is. They shave that time off. You bite that elephant in little bitty pieces, and you'll discover that you can manage it, because that's the problem. The parents are having a difficult time managing, along with the feeling of inadequacy, managing your time, because now they have added work, because we weren't doing anything. We were just, like you said, we're just dropping them off, throwing them out of the car, and keep on rolling.
Right.
But now,
right. Yeah,
we're getting educated too.
And, I think the other thing is that, our parents have had their own history of trauma.
Yes.
With schools, with the public education system, or just their local education system. They may have had trauma, with, being supported when they were in school, and they're just completely disconnected with the whole idea, of schooling. Yes. And especially, I remember talking to a parent before, and she was saying how much while her child was attending a particular public high school, she hated that high school, and she hated going in the building, because it just reminded her of so much trauma that she experienced. And so she was never really as connected to her child's academic experience, because she didn't want to be in the building. She didn't want to be the ground. She didn't want to be at the football games. Like, everything was associated with something negative. So that's, another thing that we have to contend with our parents, and help them through that, so that their child can be successful, especially now.
They have, Danielle, there are a lot of, now we started out when I was married. Now, see, I've been doing this for the last 6 or 7 years as a single dad. And even during hard times, say back in 2014, when life was not as easy as it is for me now, I still had that commitment to do this. But there are a lot of programs out there, and I'm going to put a plug in and send them a bill later. K-12 is a great homeschool curriculum. It really is. I mean, and I've looked at a lot of them, but I actually used K-12 before. Okay. It's great. Yeah. And they walk you through it. They help the parent. They have teachers that interact with your student to help you to do the work that you're trying to do. So there are resources out there for any parent that wants to do it. If you have a commitment to keep your children from, say, environments that are unhealthy in terms of the social structure and what the peer pressure is. I mean, homeschooling and blended learning is just the way to go, because you have more time with the child to build their what they value, build their values, what your values are,
Absolutely. So, and I'm familiar with the K-12, because I think that was the curriculum that they were using when my daughter was doing digital learning in Texas. Yes. And I just remember reading. It's been a while, but I do remember that. So that's, yes, send us the bill later. I read an article in Forbes magazine, and it suggested that on one of the things that parents should do in preparation with the decision to homeschool is to actually create a network with other parents, or just, try to figure out how to create a network just to help them. And some parents are connecting with others in their neighborhoods. Form like small homeschool, micro schools.
There are 2 students right across the street from us who are homeschooled.
Okay.
And we actually do that. And turns out several kids down the street, they're not going back to school.
Right.
So they actually go over to the swimming pool or play basketball during the recess time and all the activities that they can do outdoors.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
You know, it's just a matter of being creative.
Creative, tapping into your neighborhoods, because you're all kind of going through.
Instead of saying I can't, say how can I?
How can I support you?
Yes.
How can I get the information that I need so that I can strengthen this learning?
That's what the parent has to say. They have, you know, how can I? Because if you say I can't, then you immediately cut off all the information that could come at you.
Exactly.
But if you say, how can I? You don't, you know, I used to tell my boys when they said, I can't. Like, for example, I remember my 17-year-old, he had a difficult time with fractions. And Daddy, I can't do this. And I would simply say, don't say, I can't say, I don't know how.
Exactly.
If I make it sound like a rhyme in his head, don't say I can't, say I don't know how.
Love that.
And so what happens is it's not an admission that it's not saying you can't. You just simply don't know how.
Don't know how to do it. Right. But I'm open.
It opens you up to that kind of stuff. So it's little techniques to, or don't, you know, say this is stupid. The parent is frustrated, the child is frustrated, and the parent is saying this is dumb. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, everybody's saying it's dumb. So everybody's closed off, so no one can help one another.
Yeah. So those kind of things, I would not be telling the truth if I didn't think sometimes how dumb the curriculum was and how it doesn't make sense in this long way. But you know,
exactly.
If you want your children to grow up with strong values, strong a sense of accomplishment, and being able to see my biggest thing, Danielle, is that I don't like to make excuses for failure. I'm going to find a way to get it done.
Right.
Okay. So this is the psychological impact of it. Instead of us having children who grow up to be complainers, we have children that are action oriented, and they will find a way to get things done. And that's what we need. I mean, you know, I'm really big on the African American community. We've got to get doers.
Exactly.
We have to start create some doers. You know, we got enough talkers. We got
dreamers. We got a lot of dreamers, a lot of talkers.
We got to start doing.
Exactly. Well, that's good. That's some good feedback. So what do you think about this whole micro school movement that's growing during this pandemic, where according to Good Morning America, they were saying that micro schools are usually like these home-based, multi-age learning communities, and it's usually no more than like a dozen of children inside the space, and facilitated by like instructors that maybe parents in the community has gotten together to pay for these instructors to come in, or maybe it's an educator that's been laid off and you bring them in to have this experience with your young children. What do you think about those micro learning or those micro schools?
It's part of the evolution of this nation. So, and it's kind of going into a political discussion too, but just to stay away from that to a great degree. It's the country is regrouping, rehashing, redoing it, resetting. That's what's going on right now. And there's no institution that's going to escape that reset, including the institution of education and the educational paradigm.
Right.
So the idea of the micro school is going to grow because that's how it started. You know, and it grew into these big monstrosities.
Right.
To where I'm paying $20,000 a year of school taxes, property taxes for schools. That's my property taxes.
Yes.
For schools.
Right.
So if you have the money to move into a good district, then okay, but that's beside the point. The micro school idea that you mentioned.
Right.
I just think it's great. I think that this is what the country needed, because if you're ready, and it only means that if you're ready to move into action, there's a lot of opportunities. Every time there's a disaster, if you will, there's a lot of opportunities that's created.
Right.
And it's just a matter of being ready for them, moving with it, and then finding where you fit in and fit in where you get in. The students, parents that's listening today, they don't have to go it alone. The schools have it now to where it's distance learning. Mm-hmm. And then they tell them to come in once a week or so.
Right. Right.
So it's a great time because of, and we can influence the educational model right now from the floor. Black women are the highest educated people in this country.
Yeah, I know that.
Okay. You all have more education than everybody. I mean, excuse me, everybody. So it's a time to influence the development of education because we need a new paradigm. Right. Now that's a big picture approach, and I know we're talking about the little micro thing, but I mean that comes from all of that. These whole ideas come from all these little micro schools and micro this and micro that, micro learning communities and stuff like that.
And you and I have had a couple conversations in the past about opportunities and being prepared for these. There's trauma happening across our country, but we are uniquely positioned to get in front of that, especially in the grouping where we are connected. Uniquely positioned to get in front of this and make some major changes. And even with this homeschooling experience, technology, all of these pieces that, I don't know if we're realizing just yet how we're fitting in this space. But
how we're fitting in. But see, the distraction is worrying about what somebody else is doing. That's the distraction right there.
Right.
I did some research back in 2009. And it was quite by accident on learning modalities between Asian students and African-American students. It was just an accident.
Wow.
I was working with a client of mine who had a school who prepared kids for the SAT and the AP calculus and all that. And the Asian kids were flooding it out and they're just doing it. And so we got African-American kids part of the system because we wanted that whole influence to come there and, help, the motivation there. Well, the Black kids didn't do well at all. And on the practice test, they just bombed. It was embarrassing because I'm the only Black man in there. And,
Right.
Well, one particular time, my secretary correlated the test packets. The practice test.
Wow.
She put the sections in different orders by mistake. Wow. And so we didn't know it until we handed it out. All of the Asian kids, a majority, I should say, were frustrated. Wow. And they got up and walked out. This test is not the way it's supposed to be. It's not like this. This is not the way. They totally frustrated because it was completely out of order from what they were used to doing.
Wow.
The Black kids, all of a sudden, they're just going at it. And I made a mental note the first time, but she did it again. She was new. So several weeks later, she did the same thing. She just miscorrelated, put different sections in different places. And the same thing happened. The Black kids scored off the charts and the Asian kids were totally frustrated.
Wow.
So I said, now what could be?
Wow.
Could it be that all the chaos that we have been subjected to as a people somehow has factored into the way we learn, and maybe you should just hand it to us kind of hodgepodge like that and we can do better because we're better at straightening it out as opposed to doing it in order?
Right.
I mean, I started purposely miscorrelating the test. And sure enough, my data was just on top of each other. They're just doing much better. Now, the Asian kids caught on, but I noticed a significant improvement in the Black children's scores every time I put that test in the different order than what they expected.
Wow. That's something else.
Every time.
By accident.
It was completely by accident. But see, this is what we're talking about right now, this whole learning thing. We're in an environment now where you can find a lot of stuff by accident, but if we're not keen to it and think that it's not good enough and we have to force it back to the way it was, then we will miss the developing a theory of relativity, if you get my drift.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's wonderful. Well, thank you for that. What would you say if you had to give other dads that has multiple children in the home some advice right now because they're homeschooling? What type of advice would you give them as they're struggling to try to balance it all?
Well, you probably know this from me, about me, but I'm very philosophical. I function on, I get a principle in my mind and I let that principle guide my thinking and my behavior. So I would say to the dads, it's okay to be a dad, number one. And I know that we know that. It's okay to educate your own children because education is the transmission of civilization. Mm-hmm. If you get that definition in your mind that I am transmitting my civilization to my children, mm-hmm. then it becomes a mission as opposed to a job.
Wow.
Because you really have a picture of what you're really doing. You're not just getting them out of school. You are creating a society of people that look like you, think like you, are like you. And believe me, you want to stop police brutality and all the statistics. Get an idea in your head and let that idea sink in and develop and watch the respect we get as Black men. Mm. Because see, the reason we're not respected is because we're not committed. Mm. Now I'm gonna preach and then I'm gonna send you my offering envelope.
Okay.
But we gotta commit.
Right.
We gotta, Danielle, I'm a nice guy. I'm educated. I got $2 in my pocket. I drive a nice car. I could go out. I want to go out and have some fun with some ladies. But
you got to focus.
I got to focus. But so my mission is what keeps it in order and keep it in perspective.
Right. Absolutely.
So a lot of times we think that we're going to miss something if we take the time out to do this. But in reality, you're going to miss something if you don't take the time out.
Exactly.
Take care of your children. Don't be afraid to give them what's inside of you because God gave that to you for your children. That's why you dad. That's why, and I tell the boys all the time, you can rebel against me all you want, but God gave you to me,
right,
to train. So it's something in me that you need.
Right.
So the dads we just got to get committed. Don't be afraid of what your eyes see, of your feeling of inadequacy. Dive in and be who you are because it is enough.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. Yes, offering.
So where should I send my offering envelope? Tithes and offerings. Now send your tithes.
Well, thank you so much. This is our lightning round now. We're going to jump into our lightning round.
5 seconds. Okay.
Now that you didn't set it up, you didn't set up the energy. Okay. So this is where we get an opportunity to share with you a couple controversial statements or questions, and you can either, speak to the affirmative or the negative, or you can go passing on it because that's just too controversial for you to respond to. So it's only 5 of them. Are you ready for that?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Okay. So the first one is much more expensive to homeschool.
I think, no, it's not. It's much more expensive not to homeschool.
Good answer. The second one is teacher certification. It doesn't determine an educator's capacity to be successful in the classroom.
I agree totally, because if the teachers are failing, who wants to get certified in how to fail?
Question. The next one, current public school curriculum needs to be changed.
Absolutely, it needs to be changed. It needs to be changed by the people who are subject to it.
Absolutely. And number 4, homeschool children do not receive the same quality of education.
That's correct. They don't. They receive a better education 5 of the last 7 or so children who have won this national spelling bee were homeschooled.
Okay. All right. Didn't know that. I tried for the spelling bee. Didn't work.
My son made it to the county, but you know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, my last one is parents should have formalized education to homeschool.
I think that there's an innate skill given to the parent by virtue of that's his child. So I would disagree with that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. You did well on our lightning round. Thank you again, Dr. Alonzo Fleming, for taking the time to speak with us. You know, you preached to us, you passed the plate, all that good stuff. It was an absolute pleasure. And I also want to thank our listeners. Thank you, listeners, once again for tuning in with us for week 4 of Homeschooling, the New Normal. If you want to get in contact with Dr. Alonzo Fleming, please follow his Facebook, his website, all of that. I have his information below, and you can find all about him and what he's doing and how you can be edified in the way that we were just now.
Can I give a plug for myself?
Oh, you
okay. So if you go to brainstormtexas.com, that's brainstormtexas.com. I just placed the link on there that says homeschooling coach. So I will help you to get off the ground if you need help. And I'm also saying that if anybody from this show were to go to that and sign up for coaching, then I think I put $199 or something. I forgot what it was. The rest of the school year, I will get some of my staff to help your children, give them 30 minutes of coaching per week or an hour of coaching per week so that we can help get them off the ground. Even if they're doing blended learning, just go to brainstormtexas.com. You'll see homeschool coach. Click on that link and fill out the form.
Y'all heard that. Y'all heard that here first. Brainstormtexas.com. Homeschool coach. Click that. Get your edification on. So thank you again. And if there was something that you heard today that energized you or triggered additional questions, please remember to comment below, like, share, and subscribe, and continue to visit our website also at www.embracingarms.com for opportunities to participate in more discussions and amazing workshops. I want to remind my listeners to be safe, practice social distancing, and if you don't want to wear a face covering for you, wear it because you care about the safety and health of others. Please remember to go out in the community and embrace someone because they're waiting on you, and continue to live your absolute best life.
Hello, Embracing Arms community. I'm Dr. Alonzo Fleming. I'm an education consultant from the state of Texas, and I'm stopping by today to remind you just to live your best life.
My prescription, boy, this is my medicine. The world can be sickening and living in house resemblance. Not to mention the media's effort to keep us in the most simplistic state of mind. Lowest age bracket committing the highest rate of crime. People dying way before they hit their age of prime. Thinking success only happens if they shoot hoops, move cane or rhyme. Peek through these blinds, over the porch and into these streets. You see why protective moms keep their daughters out of reach from activities. Sure to have them 6 feet deep under the grounds where our local dope dealers meet. From a window